Welcome back to WD.
FM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. We're your hosts, Brie Bertolacini, Content and Research Manager.
And Chris Mullen, Marketing and Editorial Specialist at the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Happy June and welcome back, Chris.
Glad to be back. So excited for the summer months. We're getting closer to when it'll actually be warm in San Francisco, which is, of course, the month of September.
Yeah.
But just it's I don't know, when summer comes around, things feel a little brighter, a little sunnier, a little happier. So happy that summer is back in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
June is Pride Month, and in celebration, we are screening and hosting a special Q&A about the documentary Howard. This 2018 documentary highlights Disney legend, producer, and lyricist Howard Ashman, whose work included penning beloved songs for Walt Disney Animation Studios' The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. Inspired by Howard Ashman's work, let's open up this episode with our favorite Howard Ashman songs in a Disney film. Brie, why don't you kick us off?
Well, I just rewatched Howard again. It's such a great documentary made by Don Hahn. And what really stood out to me on this kind of rewatch is there's just some really great footage with Howard Ashman talking about the idea of an I Want song and how that, as part of a successful musical, the lead really expresses what they want. And through that story, they are working towards getting what they want. And that's kind of a key point in really successful Broadway musicals. And that was something that he brought into Disney musicals at that point. There's some great audio of an interview from one of the animators saying, I'm surprised we never knew that. We didn't even realize about the idea of an I Want song. And so one of my favorite I Want songs from Howard Ashman is Part of Your World in The Little Mermaid. Now, it was the song that was almost cut from the film, and luckily, with Howard's insistence, that the song actually stayed in the film. So it's one of the most memorable songs in the film. And every time I hear Jodie Benson singing it, it still like brings me to tears because you just could hear how much she wants to be up above that water with her feet in the sand. What about you, Chris?
Well, I personally love that Howard Ashman wrote a song called Disneyland that Jodie Benson sang in his Broadway musical Smile that would eventually lead Jodie Benson to the role of Ariel. However, I know that's not really the point of this question. First, I want to give a shout out to the mob song from Beauty and the Beast, this Pride Month especially. Howard Ashman was suffering from AIDS during production of The Little Mermaid, and while songs were being written for Beauty and the Beast, a project he kind of begrudgingly took on while Aladdin, the film he wanted to write songs for, was further back in production. Reportedly, Howard Ashman saw the Beast's affliction as an allegory for AIDS, making the mob song a clear metaphor for the ostracism many gay people with AIDS felt during this time. However, beyond that very kind of emotional connection to that song, my favorite Howard Ashman Disney song overall is likely Under the Sea. So I'm sticking with your movie there, Brie. The song was Disney's first to win an Academy Award since Chim Chim Cheree from Mary Poppins, released 25 years earlier. The song, which also won a Grammy, number one, just goes so unbelievably hard. And two, is still being mentioned among the all-time Disney songs nearly 35 years after its release, for good reason. Life truly is the bubbles.
That really is such a good song. And in the documentary, you really get an insight into how Howard Ashman was developing these songs. And there was a purpose in every single one of these musical numbers. That Under the Sea is Sebastian trying to convince Ariel to stay under the sea. It wasn't just a frilly song just to be singing in the moment, where Howard was pretty cynical about kind of the modern day movie musical. And so how, Part of Your World is that I Want song. Under the Sea is that really catchy, plead, stay underwater where it's safe. So I just, again, really love Howard as a documentary, and these such great picks. And there's really so many other songs. I'm a big Little Shop of Horrors fan, so that's a completely different podcast. Well, you can see the documentary Howard in our theater this month, so see our calendar for showtimes.
And join us on Saturday, June 22nd for a special screening of Howard. And following the film, there will be a fireside chat with the director of the film, Don Hahn, former president of Walt Disney Music, Chris Montan, and moderated by Jacob Stensberg, the conductor and artistic director of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. Tickets are still available. Visit our website for more information.
Well, that was a great way to get into some of our museum updates. Now, each month in celebration of the Walt Disney Company's 100th anniversary, we've been highlighting different important objects in the museum's collection and a special display in our awards lobby. This month's new rotation highlights the special friendship between Walt Disney and American illustrator Norman Rockwell. On display is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain that was gifted to Walt from Norman Rockwell. The special edition of Tom Sawyer includes 8 illustrations from Rockwell, and this one is inscribed to Walt. The inscription reads, "To Walt Disney, with sincere respect for his great art, Norman Rockwell." You can see the special inscribed book on display through the end of June. Now, this isn't the only Rockwell artifact you can see in the awards lobby. The facsimiles of the Rockwell portraits of Walt's daughters, Diane and Sharon, are on permanent display at the back right corner of the awards lobby.
We recently announced our next slate of programs debuting through the summer.
On Saturday, July 20th, join us for a special talk with animator and Netflix's Love on the Spectrum cast member, Danny Bowman, as she discusses her journey working in animation and building her own animation company, Dannymation Entertainment.
That should be a good one as well.
A little farther down the calendar, join us Saturday, September 14th for a talk with former Walt Disney Imagineering Executive Director Eddie Sato as he revisits how Imagineering translated Main Street USA for a European audience with the development of Disneyland Paris.
Good grief. Join us on Saturday, September 21st for a screening of Snoopy Presents Welcome Home Franklin, and then a discussion on the legacy of the character Franklin with Charles M. Schulz Museum curator Benjamin Clark and cartoonist Rob Strong, who is the namesake of Franklin, so don't miss that.
That should be a fun one. I love the Charles Schulz Museum up in Santa Rosa, so it's kind of our great animation museums kind of coming together in this great way. Now, if you're interested in our workshop offerings, we do have a special in-person workshop available on Saturday, August 3rd with Walt Disney Animation Studios artist Griselda Sastrawinata LeMay, where she will teach the art of developing your own stylized cat using digital painting. This workshop is intended for students in grades 9 through 12 and adults.
We also have other workshops on the horizon for those interested in learning animation. Our Studio Series workshops are 90-minute classes available for youth and adults where you learn one particular animation practice or action. Upcoming class topics include animate a lion roar, animate a boat, animate a spoonful of sugar, animate a roller coaster, and animate a brick toy character. Classes are offered virtually and in person, but not for all of them, so check out our calendar to see which one aligns with which class.
To be the first to know about all of these programs and workshops available at the Walt Disney Family Museum, consider signing up for our email newsletter. Head to waltdisney.org and scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, of any page, to find the sign up link. Now it is time for our collections clash. Let's take a quick look back at last month's clash. The topic was flowers and trees, and it was quite the botanical competition. For the first round, I won the round with my pick of Ivan Earle's Sleeping Beauty background paintings against Chris's pick of Tyrus Wong's Bambi backgrounds. The battle of the backgrounds.
You really brought those backgrounds to the foreground.
There we go.
For the second round, I know we said last episode that there was a round that was the closest round we'd ever had. Well, this round is now the closest round we've ever had, and it was by a margin of just 1 vote. So your vote counts. Your vote is important. It was between my pick of the Snow White cell of her running through the trees and Bree's pick of Gustav Tengren's concept drawing of the Old Mill. In the end, that 1 vote that broke the tie went for Bree's pick.
Well, for the final round, it was more of a margin, and Chris's pick won with Walt's Conservation Awards against my pick of the Water Babies animation drawings.
Congrats, Bree, on your well-fought win.
Thank you. First one of the year. Woo!
Even though it may not feel like summertime in San Francisco, we wanted to celebrate the season with the topic of summer fun. It's a broad topic, so let's jump in and see how each of us interpreted it. As a reminder, you, the audience, gets to vote on your favorite object in each round on our Instagram story. Bree, since you won the last clash, you get to go first.
In the spirit of summer, I'm going with a favorite summertime activity, swimming, represented by the 1942 short How to Swim. And we have a poster of this wonderful short on display. This poster has Goofy in his bathing suit practicing his swimming moves outside of the water on a stool. Not the most effective. These how to Goofy shorts are just so much fun. And in this particular one, Goofy really does make his best attempt to showcase his diving and swimming techniques.
Well, that's a way to make quite the splash for a first pick. I'll follow that up with my own example of that same quintessential summer cool down activity, swimming and lounging by the pool. Now, to take a step back, Walt Disney once said, quote, "A man should never neglect his family for business." In addition to driving his daughters Diane and Sharon to school every day until they were of driving age, Walt would spend Sundays or Daddy's Day with his girls. We typically tell this story in relation to our Griffith Park bench, but it certainly highlights how important family time was to him, which in the hot Los Angeles summers almost assuredly meant plenty of time by the pool. We have on display a picture of Walt and family by the pool and various video clips, my favorite of which being Walt sitting in a canoe that is then pushed into the pool. So when Walt does it, it's cute and fun and fatherly, but when I do it, I'm a danger to myself and others and need to leave. Doesn't seem quite fair, but I digress.
Well, that's a great pick, Chris. And since this is a snake style draft, you have the next selection.
For my next summer related pick, think of the various fun summery attractions that you can go to: theme parks, festivals, fairs, boardwalks, carnivals, roadside attractions, and the like. My second pick is an event Walt was heavily involved in that not only took place during the summer, but impacted many summers to come: the 1964-65 New York World's Fair, as represented by this program in our collection. Developing exhibits for the fair provided unique opportunities for Walt Disney and his Imagineers. Walt was interested in testing Disney entertainment with East Coast audiences to inform his decision on whether or not to build another park there. Walt also saw the opportunity for research and development for new attractions that could ultimately end up in Disneyland, but would be paid for on the dime of other corporations for the fair. The four exhibits developed by Disney were Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln for the state of Illinois, Carousel of Progress for General Electric, Magic Skyway for Ford, and It's a Small World for Pepsi Cola to salute and benefit UNICEF. The Disney attractions were some of the most popular exhibits at the fair. 135,000 visitors per day visited Disney's four exhibits during the first season alone. The World's Fair took place from late April to mid-October, 1964 and 1965. That part might not be surprising. However, all four Disney attractions also opened at Disneyland on or near their respective summers. Great Moments of Mr. Lincoln opened at Disneyland on July 18th, 1965. It's a Small World opened on May 28th, 1966. Carousel of Progress opened at Disneyland on July 2nd, 1967. People Mover also opened at Disneyland on July 2nd, 1967. Even the Primeval World diorama, viewable on the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad between the Tomorrowland and Main Street stations, opened at Disneyland on July 1st, 1966. Now that's what I call summer.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of summer fun. I really wish I could have visited the New York World's Fair during the 1964-65 run just to see all of the hustle and bustle of that fair. For my second pick, I'm going with the summertime activity that Walt enjoyed: lawn bowling. We have his personalized lawn bowling leather bag and a couple of lawn bowling balls on display in our galleries. Now, Walt enjoyed summer days at his home at Smoke Tree Ranch in Palm Springs with his family. Smoke Tree Ranch is a community made up of privately owned homes and rentable cottages. Your membership to the housing community provides an all-inclusive 3 meals a day dining plan, horseback riding, lawn bowling teams, and many other ranch activities. Walt became a member of Smoke Tree in 1946 and built his own home on the property in 1948. And Walt's first home at Smoke Tree was sold to finance his dream for Disneyland. After Disneyland proved to be successful, Walt would purchase his second home on the ranch in 1957. So Smoke Tree had a long-standing tradition of lawn bowling, and Walt was an enthusiastic participant. It was traditional to wear all white to play, and Walt would get dressed up in the correct attire and spend an afternoon rolling lopsided balls across a 100-foot green space. Now, one year, Walt even sponsored a tournament. Walt and Lillian gave out trophies that were engraved with their initials. So,
Wow, I am really bowled over by that pick. Since we're doing the snake style draft, what's your last pick?
well, when I think of summer, I think of summer vacations. And when I think of that, I think about some of Walt's summer vacations. And Walt and his family took so many vacations during the summer that many of those special memories were recorded by Walt on his Bell and Howell 200 electric eye 16 millimeter movie camera. So that'll be my last selection. Walt purchased this camera around 1957, where he used it to document his travels with his family. So many of the videos, the family videos that you see throughout the galleries, were taken on this camera. It was on the Disney family's final summer trip to British Columbia that Walt took this camera with him. And during the trip, the family celebrated Walt and Lillian's anniversary and their granddaughter Tamara's birthday. Walt's granddaughter Tamara remembers, quote, "I just remember it being a very happy time for all of us kids and for my parents. We would stop at a lot of different beaches, walk around the woods, the beautiful British Columbia area," end quote. So you can see this final footage that Walt took on this trip and the very end of our final gallery.
Great final pick. For my final pick, summer is known for many things, and for a museum centered around a filmmaker, I'd be remiss not to make a nod to the tradition of the summer blockbuster. Bonus points, in my view, if the films take place in the summer, or better yet, have summer in the name. For my final pick, I'm picking movie posters of two Haley Mills classics, The Parent Trap and Summer Magic. Summer Magic, of course, has summer in the name, but it was also released smack dab in the middle of summer, July 7th, 1963. The Parent Trap was also released in summer, June 21st, 1961, and, as many will note, Haley Mills and Haley Mills, Haley Squared, Haley's Mills, however you say the two Mills. The two twins, separated at birth, were unexpectedly reunited at a summer camp. Both films feature Sherman Brothers songs, the most successful of which was Let's Get Together, which peaked at number 8 on the Billboard US charts. It was clearly that me espresso of 1961. In a blog for the museum back in 2010, Academy Award-winning producer Jonas Rivera of Pixar fame remarked that, quote, "To me, The Parent Trap is the quintessential Disney live-action movie. From the beautiful animated opening title sequence created by Xavier Atencio, also known as X Atencio, Bill Justice, and T. He, to the final shot, it has almost an indescribable 1961 soundstage glow to it, and it stands as one of the most perfectly cast films of all time." I mean, a film can be perfectly cast when you have one person doing two roles, I guess. As one of Walt Disney's most bankable live action stars, one could say that Haley Mills has always had that summer magic about her.
That was such a great selection. This was such a fun round. I like how each of us kind of interpreted different summertime activities. So this is fun. Now it is time for our honorable mentions. These will not be up for voting. My first selection is a summertime activity I like to do during the summer at Disneyland, and that is to ride the Mark Twain Riverboat. This is represented by the Mark Twain Riverboat model on display in our galleries. So when the SoCal heat is just beating down when you're at Disneyland, I love grabbing a refreshing beverage and jumping on the Mark Twain to ride around the rivers of America. I recently had the sparkling pickle lemonade, and it's my new favorite summer drink. So
Very nice. I also love riding the Mark Twain during the summer, during the winter, during the fall, during the spring, during that any time of the year. Summer is also a great time for international travel. So my first honorable mention is Walt and El Grupo's passport photos from the 1941 South American Goodwill Tour, a trip that also started during the summer. The idea for the 1941 tour can be traced back to the U.S. government. Although still officially neutral at that time, the U.S. was very concerned about World War II and the growing influence of the Axis powers in Latin America. To combat and perhaps counteract this influence, the Roosevelt administration placed greater emphasis on its Good Neighbor program, which aimed to strengthen the diplomatic and economic ties between the American continents. Part of this program involved sending envoys to the different countries of Latin America so that they could demonstrate American friendship. When approached to be such an envoy, Walt was initially reluctant as he felt more comfortable in the shoes of a filmmaker and not those of a politician. But upon hearing the suggestion that he could also use such a tour as an opportunity to do research for films with Latin American themes, Walt acquiesced. Although the 1941 tour started as a diplomatic overture to the countries of Latin America, it also yielded a pivotal creative moment for Mary Blair. Her epiphany not only benefited Disney's South American themed films, but would go on to influence future films, children's books, and various media for Disney and others for years to come.
For my second honorable mention, I'm going with Walt's horse saddle that he won on his Rancheros Visitores trip. Walt was an avid horseback rider and lover of horses, so this is a great summertime activity Walt participated in. Every May, the Rancheros Visitadores group would gather and meet on the ranch land in Santa Barbara, where they would receive a blessing from the Santa Ynez mission and embark on a 60-mile horse ride north. This trek mirrored the path cattle ranchers in the mid 19th century who would meet and join to drive their cattle to market. This saddle was won in a raffle, and why it's an honorable mention is because Walt never actually used the saddle to ride any of his horses. He actually made use of it later as a prop for close up scenes for Zorro's horse, Tornado.
All right, now you're just horsing around. For my second honorable mention, I'm going to an event that happened in a particular summer at a place that is now very popular in the summer and every other time of year. Walt and Lily Disney's Tempest Fugit celebration for their 30th wedding anniversary, just days in advance of Disneyland's opening day. The honorable mention, of course, being the invitation that we have on display. Quote, "It began," recalled Diane Disney Miller, "on the Mark Twain riverboat," of course, that Bree just mentioned, "with mint juleps, and then moved over to the Golden Horseshoe Saloon for dinner and the review. Suddenly, Dad appeared in one of the balcony boxes on the side of the stage. At this point in the show, Wally Bogue, as Pecos Bill, was firing blanks. Dad returned fire with his thumb and forefinger, then began to climb down the stage. I think that everyone got a bit worried. I know I did. When he got to the stage, he stood there beaming at everyone. He was so happy," end quote. When Lily reluctantly joined her husband on the Golden Horseshoe stage, Walt started dancing with his bride of 30 years. Quote, "She didn't know it," revealed Wally Bogue, "but he had taken some dancing lessons because he knew how happy it would make her." And soon everyone was dancing.
I just love talking about the love story that is Walt and Lillian and all the ways that they showed love for each other and really showed up for each other in those special moments. So it was a great pick, Chris. For my last honorable mention, I'm going back to the desert with my selection of Disney artist Josh Meader's oil painting depicting the landscape of Smoke Tree Ranch that's on display in our awards lobby. Now, Josh Meader was an animator, special effects artist, and animation director for the Disney Studios in the 1940s and 50s. He worked on special effects for the Rite of Spring segment in Fantasia, and would later be on the special effects team for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, for which the Disney Studio won the Academy Award for Special Effects. Now, when Walt would stay at his home in Smoke Tree Ranch, he would frequently invite artists who worked for his studio to paint the magnificent scenery. Meader would end up spending a lot of time in the desert painting these types of desert landscapes. This artwork is one of many of Meader's works that Walt and Lillian collected. So it's a nice depiction of that summertime in the desert.
Nice honorable mention. And speaking of depicting summer, summer memories for generations have been captured by all manner of camera technology. So my last honorable mention is the Kodak Instamatic camera Walt used in the mid 1960s to document some of his final trips with his family. We have great shots from this camera on display in one of our final galleries, and you may be surprised at some of the destinations. From Diane Disney Miller, quote, "During the summer of 1965, I accompanied Ron to Paris for a week-long business trip, and our children were to spend that time with my parents. 10-year-old Chris was away at summer camp for the first time. Dad decided that he wanted to see SeaWorld and Vacation Village in San Diego to get ideas for the new Florida Disneyland they were planning. Mother and Fufu went to our home in Encino and gathered up suitable clothing for the girls and nearly 4-year-old Walter. They all flew down to San Diego on the King Air, leaving toddler Ronnie at home with Fufu. By chance, they were all attired in blue and white seersucker and presented a charming picture when they arrived. Dad had with him a new Kodak Instamatic camera," end quote.
That is such a great pick, and those photos are just so adorable. Seeing them in their little seersucker outfits, all matching, and just some of the photos that are taken. And one of them taken by Walter. There's one of Walt like kneeling down with a little sandwich in his hand. Walter shared the story of how this is his first and only photo that he ever took of his grandfather, and how special that photo is, taken with this very camera. So very good. And, with all of that, that brings us to the end of this episode. Visit our Instagram stories today to vote on your favorite objects, or email us at podcast@wdfmuseum.org to cast your votes, or even just share your thoughts and comments.
Thanks for tuning in to WDFM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all social channels at WDF Museum for all the latest updates. Soak up some sun this summer and keep moving forward.
Bye.
Bye.